So let's introduce Jeff Anderton. He'll be our presenter today. He's been doing chemistry, counting from student through teaching for 27 years. He's got a chemical engineering degree from Georgia Tech, and he also has a secondary science education degree from Kennesaw State with a focus in chemistry. He's got 15 years of teaching experience. He'll be starting his 16th year a week from today. I think we're like the earliest in the country. By the way, when are you guys starting? Leave that in the chat. I'd love to know. And he's also got experience as an academic dean while teaching and an interim headmaster while teaching. So he really understands what it's like to be in the classroom and how schools work on the outside as well. And he can bring that expertise to you guys. He's also my husband of 11 years and a wonderful daddy to our 5-year-old and our newborn. Yes, we're in that stage. I bet you remember. So now let's bring him on. Hey, Jeff, I'm so excited for what you prepared for us. What do we have to look forward to?
Right. First, I just want to say thank you for taking time to invest in yourselves. That as teachers, that's one of the things we've got to learn how to do, is to take that time to invest in ourselves, invest in our learning, and I'm excited about that. I'm excited also to show you how to focus your energy on the 20% of things that's going to give you 80% of your results in your classroom. That we can streamline our process in our class by kind of looking at these 7 steps. So with that, let me get the presentation started. Turn off my camera. All right, so this is 7 steps to setting up your chemistry class for success. How to be a great chemistry teacher without sacrificing your out-of-school life. Like Ariel said, I'm Jeff Anderton. And like Ariel said, but let me kind of go through this real quick. You're in the right place if you're new to teaching. You're in the right place if you're new to teaching chemistry. You're in the right place if you're just struggling to keep your kids engaged. If it feels like a big juggling act, trying to keep them all engaged. You're in the right place if your responsibilities outweigh your resources. If your administration just doesn't get what it takes to teach chemistry. Imagine that. Or you're looking for new and creative ideas. You know, for me, so much of my story comes from these things, and we'll get to that in a moment. All right, here's what you'll be learning. You'll be learning the 7 critical steps that you can take to ensure that you have a great chem class this year. You can learn a very specific way to structure your class without having to spend hours prepping every day. And how to win your students' hearts so that you can win their minds. To me, this is the essential key to student engagement. That if you can get your students to respect and trust you and you win their hearts, you'll have their minds. And then how to avoid grading and lab headaches. And so for me, I want to make sure I show you what you're going to get at the end. I'll give you a PDF copy of these slides. You've got the handout with the fill in the blanks, but if you don't have access to a printer or you don't have the ability to type on your computer onto the handout, I'll give you a copy of the PDF, copy of the slides here at the end. And then the bonus for staying to the end is I'm also going to give you my full lesson plans for my covalent nomenclature unit. When I say full lesson plans, I mean my teaching notes, my PowerPoint slides that go with it, some videos that teach you how to explain it and how to teach it, student classwork and homework assignments, labs and activities, review sheet for the unit, and then the test. All of that is going to be yours when we get to the end of this webinar. So me, I grew up, you know, like we're currently living in Madison, Mississippi, which is outside Jackson. And I grew up outside Atlanta, actually. So I've always grown up in the South. And I grew up and just fell in love with science. I've always loved animals. I've always loved science. Kind of during that early part, Ariel asked, you know, what was your favorite show growing up or whatever? For me, I remember my weekend mornings, you know, most kids were busy watching cartoons. I was over at PBS watching Marty Stouffer's Wild America. We didn't have cable at the time, so this was PBS days. and would just watch Wild America episodes of just the animals, and just fell in love with that, and thought I'd be a vet growing up. Thought I really, when I was starting high school, I wanted to go be a field biologist studying wolves, and just loved that. And then everything changed my sophomore year in high school. I took chemistry and was like, wow, this is cool stuff. And I fell in love with chemistry and just thought it was amazing how it made everything make sense. I don't know, it just seemed great to me. And so I did what every kid who's good at chemistry and good at math does, and that's I decided to be a chemical engineer. So I went to Georgia Tech, got my chemical engineering degree. And by the time I got to my senior year, I just realized I loved chemistry, but not engineering. And it wasn't for me. And so I'm sitting there with a chemical engineering degree, not wanting to do anything with it. And I'm like, what do I do now? You know, and most people have been there at some point in time. You're like, what do I do with my life? And I decided, hey, you know, what am I good at? What do I enjoy doing? And it came down to teaching. And it was the right decision. I love teaching. Most mornings I'm ready to go, looking forward to going to work. I just love investing in people, and I love helping them understand complex topics and just get it. You know, and so my first teaching job after I got my education degree was a small private school with for attention deficit and learning disabilities. And it was a boarding school in Atlanta. And so I lived in a dorm full of 50 teenage boys for 2 years. That was an experience. But it really kind of set the beginning of what I've learned as kind of a theme for not just me, but for all teachers. And that is basically more being asked of me than I was equipped to give. And so for me, it was having to deal with, you know, so I was hired to start teaching in the fall, and I get a call in the middle of the summer. And the guy that I was replacing quit in the middle of summer school. And so they called me on a Monday and had me teaching summer school chemistry on Wednesday. So in 2 days, I had to prep the entire second semester of chemistry to teach over summer school. It was interesting. You know, and then the next summer, you know, they had me teaching summer school, and the last minute they switched classes on me, and I had 2 days to prep teaching Algebra 2, which I had never taught before. You know, things like that have just been a theme throughout my career of administrators asking something of me that I was just simply not capable of. But yet somehow I decided, you know what, I'm going to buckle down and do this. So it kind of became normal for me to put in 50, 60 hours a week. You know, when I first started teaching, I was single. I had the time to do it, but it just took its toll on me. You know, my second job, I walked into a school, in a small private Christian school, and, you know, whole school was 100, 150 kids. I was the science department. And so after a couple of years there, I went from kind of head of the science department to academic dean, second in charge of the school, to de facto interim headmaster in 6 months. And all the while still teaching 4 classes. I was teaching chemistry, advanced chemistry, algebra 2, and pre-cal. And it was just too much. I did that for 2 years, and it was a brutal price on me, on my family, on my relationships. And you know, that's kind of why I'm here, is I want to give you those resources that schools so often fail to give us as teachers. I want to be here to support y'all as chemistry teachers and to help you not be overwhelmed. And so with that, let's get moving into really why we're here, which is the 7 steps. So 7 steps of setting your chem class up for success. The first 3 steps are all about expectations. That you need to set expectations for your class, you need to set expectations for your students, and you need to set expectations for yourself. And so for your class, the very first question is, Where are your students going? If you don't have that picture in your head of where you are sending your students, then you're kind of up the creek. You know, you're going to be kind of following the book, kind of figure out what you're doing, but there's important for us to really know where we're going with our students. And for most of us, our students are usually in the college prep track, meaning they're going to college, and they're very likely going to have to take a high school science, very likely possibly even college chemistry. So that's what we're preparing them for. For some of us, we're preparing our kids for AP Chem. We need to have that in mind when we're looking at our class, because the goal of our class is not getting through the book. The goal of our class isn't necessarily even getting through all the standards of our state or the next generation science standards. The goal of our class is to prepare our students for where they're going. And so to that end, I really see that our book is a resource, not a guide. I really find that chemistry books are, in general, poorly structured. You know, why did they teach conversions in chapter 2 when you're not going to use it until you're teaching moles in chapter 9 or 10? You're going to have to reteach it all over again, because it's going to be months since your kids have seen it, they haven't used it, and you're going to have to reteach it. Why do that to yourselves? Don't follow the book, use it as a resource. Like, so I take conversions, pull it out of chapter 2, and I move it to right before moles. Because to me, that makes a lot more sense. I'm saying, hey, this is what I need to prepare my kids for, and this is what I'm doing. Chemistry books also make a big mistake of making everything look like it's of equal importance. Every chapter looks the same. Every chapter is about 30 pages. But the reality is that's not the case. That chemical reactions chapter in its 30 pages is a lot more important than the 30 pages on physical and chemical changes. And it's also a lot harder for students to learn. It takes longer for them to learn. But that 30 pages should take you longer than 2 weeks, where the physical and chemical changes chapter should take you less than 2 weeks, even though they look the same in the book. And so I'm all about where we're preparing our kids for being the deciding thing that helps us plan our curriculum, that helps us set our expectations of where we want to go. And for me, that comes down to what I call the big three. The big three are nomenclature, naming compounds, ionic and covalent, chemical reactions and balancing them, and predicting products, and then stoichiometry. And in stoichiometry, I'm including conversions, significant figures, scientific notation, and moles. All that's included there in my mind. And so those big three, and the reason why I say that call those the big three is when a student walks into a college chemistry course, and I've tutored enough people in college chemistry to see this, when people walk into a college chemistry course, those three topics are what that professor is going to cover in the first week and a half, maybe 2 weeks if they're lucky. The professor is going to, for some crazy reason, expect them to remember it from high school. And if they don't have a firm foundation there, we are setting them up to fail. And I don't want to do that to my kids. I want them to be ready to go. And so this is where I spend most of my time. I probably spend, it probably comes out close to a third of my year. It's definitely at least a quarter of my year on these big three, nomenclature, reactions, and stoichiometry. And then I shorten all the other chapters to kind of fit in with them. That you got the chapters on the left, matter and energy, atomic theory, which includes quantum mechanics, and periodic table and trends. Those are all the things that are setting the foundation for the big three. So I do them, but I do them with that mindset. I'm setting them up to be the foundation for the big three. And then I spend all of my expectations, I focus all my energy on that big three. And then after I finish the big three, I spend usually kind of my last quarter, maybe last quarter and a half, going over these other topics and doing them fairly quickly. Just really much introducing the topics. And if you look at like next generation science standards, that's really how they have them listed, that when you're talking about heat and reactions, or you're talking about reaction kinetics, or you're talking about equilibrium and with Chatelier's principle, that the standards say do it quickly. And so that's what I do. And so that's kind of how I set my expectations for my class. I think this is essential. Where are you going with your class? Where do you want your kids to be at the end of the year? And then you back plan it from there. The book's not your guide. Your state standards aren't your guide. Your guide is where you want your kids to be. Which leads me to expectations for your students. I think one of the traps that chemistry teachers and that I myself have gotten trapped into is if some of my kids are getting it, then I must be doing it the right way. And that's not necessarily the case. Because I think even when I haven't done my best job, my best and my brightest were able to keep up. But when it comes down to it, chemistry is hard. Chemistry is high order thinking by default. Now, I remember in my student teaching, one of my mentor teachers, she handed me a handout with 100 nomenclature questions on it. And it was a mixture of ionic and covalent. And she said, how long would it take you to do it? I'm like, I don't know. It's like you would be limited by how fast you could write. Because to you, this is this lowest thing on Bloom's taxonomy here. It's just knowledge. It's a recall. It's memorization. That as fast as I could write, I could fill out that sheet. And she made this great point to me. She said, now think about it. What is it like for a student who's doing it? If I give a student a formula, CaCO3, calcium carbonate, that student has to look at that formula and they have to do step one, identify is it ionic or covalent. That matters. Step two, they have to look at the Ca on the front. Is it a regular representative metal or is it a transition metal? And then they got to look at the CO3 on the back and say, all right, that's a polyatomic ion. What type of polyatomic ion is it? Is it an 8, an ite, something else? And then they got to put it all together and on a fourth step and put it all together to give me an answer. That is synthesis and analysis. That is high order thinking. And there's all these steps in there that these kids have to put together. And that's hard. Now, our best and our brightest, they're the kids that can do this on the fly. They pick that up. It's kind of our middle of the road and our bottom kids where we as teachers need to set expectations for them. And to me, that means we need to break it down into small pieces. I have this little picture of an elephant here because of the old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One piece at a time or one bite at a time. It's our job to break it down for our kids. So when I'm teaching ionic nomenclature, to go back to the calcium carbonate example, I break it down into pieces and we do one piece at a time and then we add the next piece. And I also, when I'm dealing with something that's complicated like nomenclature, I slow down. So we're going to do what we call basic binary nomenclature, like a metal and a non-metal. Simple, nothing weird. We practice that for a couple of days. We get that down. We understand it. I have a great hands-on activity that I'll tell you about later about that. And then I add transition metals. And we do that for a day or two. Get them really comfortable doing transition metals. And then I add polyatomic ions on. And we get comfortable with that. And then we pull it all together at the end, and all of a sudden they've eaten an elephant. Now, it's like my 5-year-old, his favorite food is pizza. He takes after his daddy. Good boy. He loves pizza, but up until recently, if he wanted pizza, I had to cut it up into small pieces for him. And then he would eat one piece at a time. But as he's gotten older, he's able to eat, he's just able to grab the whole piece of pizza and take one bite out of it at a time on his own. And so that's what we're trying to do with our students, that early on, we're having to cut the food for them. but we're teaching them how to take a whole piece of pizza and eat one bite at a time. So that by the time they get to the test, that 3-4 steps it takes to name something, they know how to do, and they can just do it. One of the things I do with my kids is after I do my ionic nomenclature, I do cumulative. I bring covalent and I bring acids back in, and we do one big test. But I give them a big flow chart, and we work through it and help them see how to do it. And so when I talk about expectations for your students, what I mean is understand that chemistry is hard. It's easy to you because, especially if you're experienced and you've been doing this a while, it seems easy to you. But it's not for them. Break it down. Slow down. It will do amazing things when students see that you care enough to make sure they get it and you go slow for them. All right, expectations for yourself. With this, real quick, I want to do a quick poll of how many years you've been a teacher. It should be showing up in your chat right now. So if you could click on that, see how long y'all been. All right, so y'all are kind of actually similar to the audience I had yesterday. So a number of young teachers and a number of more experienced teachers with very little in the middle. That seems to be pretty normal for chemistry from what I've seen, is that you get young teachers teaching it and either they struggle and stop teaching it or they fall in love with it and can't leave. And so with that in mind, it's important that we have expectations for ourselves. And that's where this comes from. If you are doing nothing to improve yourself, you're just growing nowhere. You're not going to grow anywhere, and that's just not helpful. If you're new to teaching, then I would say you're doing what I call growing in content, meaning you're having to make sure you understand the content well enough to be able to teach it. Just like, hey, you have your head wrapped around it, let alone getting the kids' heads wrapped around it. And then once you get there, then you can grow in communication, which is where you're growing to really give it to your kids and explain it really well. And then creativity is really taking it up to that next level. So let me explain what I mean by expectations for yourself. If you're new to teaching chemistry and you're still in that growing to content phase, realistically, you're going to be able to really teach really well 70, maybe 70% of your class, if that those kids that really, really struggle, you're not going to yet have the grasp on it to be able to be creative in how you explain it, that you're just going to have some kids that aren't going to be able to get it, unfortunately, when you're new to teaching chemistry. As you grow into, in your communication, you grow in your understanding of it, now you're able to explain it to 80, maybe 90, 95% of your kids. And then when you really get that down and you start really growing into your creativity and taking it up another level, then any kid that wants to learn in your class, you're able to explain it somehow, some way. You'll come up with some off-the-wall illustration, well, think about it like this, or you'll find out what that kid's interested in. You'll be like, oh, wait, okay, you're interested in Harry Potter. Let me use Harry Potter to explain this, or whatever the case may be. And that's where our creativity comes in. Now, I do also understand that this is not as linear as it looks, that we're always kind of circling back, growing into our content, growing in how we explain things, growing in our creativity. It is somewhat cyclical in nature, but I do see overall through a teaching career that this is also a somewhat linear progression, and that you need to take into account where you're at. If you're still just learning the content, be gracious with yourself. Be kind to yourself. You're learning. Give yourself some patience. It's going to it takes a couple years to really get the content down and be able to explain it well. And then you're going to work on that communication and just, all right, I tried to explain it this way, that didn't work. What else works? And then, doing your creativity, same thing. So really, these first 3 steps to setting up your chem class for success are all about your expectations. The picture I have in my mind is, think back to the Winter Olympics back in February. Think of Lindsey Vonn at the top of her ski run. She closes her eyes and she's visualizing where she's going to go. She's visualizing her turns. She's visualizing how she's going to attack this turn. But she's also visualizing with an understanding of what her abilities are. She's like, oh, I can't take that turn that fast. I need to slow down here before I hit that turn, or I'm going to wipe out. Like, she knows what's going on. She also knows what the conditions of the course are. And so for us, knowing the general course is having our expectations for the class. Knowing the course conditions, how good the snow is or isn't, that's our expectations of our students. And then knowing our own ability and how fast we can and cannot go is our expectations of ourselves. And that really sets up so much of our year. How are you planning out your course, your class, your curriculum? How are you viewing your students? And then how are you viewing yourself? Also on top of this, add whatever your resources you have at your school. Do you have a good lab? Great, use it. Do you have a really bad lab, like I did for a couple of years? Be gracious with yourself and do what you can. Do you have a really supportive administration? Great. If not, adjust. Do you have really supportive parents? Great. If not, take that into account. So be gracious with where you are, where your kids are, those kind of things. And that leads us to the last 4 steps. And these are more general teaching strategies. Consistency, using class time, grading, and then labs and activities. Consistency. This is a big one for me because I'm a firm believer that consistency makes a smooth path. And what I mean by consistency is this. The way I say something in lecture is the way that it's going to be worded in the homework. And the way it's worded or asked in the homework is going to be how it's going to be worded and asked on the quiz. And then what I'm looking for on the quiz is going to be the same thing I'm looking for on the review sheet and on the test. So the kids know exactly how I'm going to ask something. They know exactly what I'm looking for, and they just have to meet that expectation and deliver. And I do not mean being a pushover here. I don't mean being easy. If you ask my kids, I am anything but easy. I push them, but I tell them exactly where I'm pushing them to. I set clear expectations, and I hold to them. I'm consistent. What this does for students is it smooths the path for them. They're able to relax in a sense of, they don't have, a curveball waiting for them on the test. I had a teacher in college for physical chemistry 1. Anything and everything you never wanted to know about electrons. And his lecture was always all theory, and then his test was pure application, which he never talked about in class. I mean, that first test, I felt like I gotten broadsided by a semi-truck. I mean, just blindsided. I was like, where did that come from? I made a 60 on that first test, and I was like one of the highest grades in the class. And it just got worse as the quarter went on. I mean, on the final exam, he asked us to do stuff that, honestly, we would have needed a master's degree in physics to know how to do. I mean, it was just brutal. And I was so glad to get out of that class. And I think it was that experience more than anything that told me I did not want to do that to my students. And so I tell my students what I want them to know. I don't give them the questions from the test, but I tell them, you need to know how to do this. And then that's what I'm asking them. It makes a smooth path for me too, because when that kid comes up to me after a test and it's like, Mr. Anderton, I didn't make the grade I wanted. Was there anything on the test that I told you wasn't going to be there? No. Okay. Did you prepare? No. All right. End of discussion. I do it a little bit nicer than that, but I mean, I'm generally that forthright with them. You know what I asked you to do, and you didn't do it. That's not my responsibility. So it smooths out my path because it helps me to be fair. And that's a big thing for me is that when I'm consistent and fair with my students, they trust me. They start to trust that, what I say is what's going to happen. And when they begin to trust me, then they begin to pay more attention in class. They get to be a little more engaged in class because I know that I'm there for them. Consistency also helps me to emphasize what is important in my classroom. For me, when I'm doing conversions and calculations in class, having the correct unit on the answer and getting within one significant figure properly on an answer is important to me. And so after we study those first things, when we first start doing conversions and significant figures, I'm consistent with it throughout the rest of the year. They know that's what I expect. And so they do it. They deliver. And it helps them to see, I think this is important. And I think that's critical for using consistency that way. All right, using class time. Out of all of my 7 steps, I would say this one is the most unconventional because I see over and over and over again, teachers get caught, and I got caught early in my career in what I call the homework cycle. Because you're taught, early on in your teaching career, you're taught in your education degrees, you need to teach bell to bell. And what most of us interpret that to mean is I need to lecture bell to bell. And so we start teaching, we do maybe a little warm up, gather their attention, and then we go through the period, we give great examples of what we need to do. We get to the end of the period, we give them their homework, and we send them on their way. They walk into class the next day. A quarter of them, your best and brightest, did the homework and got it right. A quarter of them didn't even bother. But it's the other half that concerns me. Half of them did the homework or attempted the homework and did it wrong. They practiced it wrong. They built mental pathways in their brain on how to do these problems that was wrong. And at some point in time, I think, it was when I started coaching soccer that I ran across this phrase. I was helping the soccer coach, and he would always say, you play like you practice. Like if our students and, if my kids on my soccer team, if they practice at half speed, when they got to the game, they weren't going to be able to play full speed because that's not how they practice. If you practice wrong, you're going to play wrong. And I realized that works the same way in class. That if my students practice these problems wrong, they've kind of trained their brain that that's how these problems are done, and it's so hard to unteach that they make the exact same mistakes on their test. And so what I've done is I will take my class time and I will shorten my lecture down to about a half to maybe 2/3 of the class. I still do some examples, but then I hand out classwork assignments, usually 3 to 5 questions on whatever we're talking about. And then when I hand that out, I am walking around guiding my students. I am trying to help, I'm trying to catch any mistakes they make early on and fix them. And I've really found that this is a great activity for 2 types of students in particular. One is that really quiet one who never says anything. Just, because then it allows you to interact with them. You can ask them questions and they can respond, maybe single syllable answers, but you're still engaging them. And then the second group that this is really good for are those kids who are too hard on themselves. Let's say I'm teaching moles and we're doing mole conversions. And some student gets the wrong answer and they're freaking out that they got the wrong answer. I can walk over there and look at their handout and be like, oh, you made this one small mistake right here. And they're sitting there trying to erase the whole problem. And they're all freaking out. I'm just like, whoa, stop. Erase this one thing. Fix this one thing. And they're like, oh. And then they start to grow in confidence on themselves because they're not beating themselves up for making one tiny little mistake. It's huge for that group of kids. And this has been essential in my teaching career. This has really changed my classroom. And really because of this. My kids know that I'm there for them. That when I teach them how to do, we're doing quantum mechanics. And quantum mechanical model is weird and hard at first. Now, I even tell my kids, like, hey, you can be confused for the next 3 days, but give me 3 days. And by the time we get to the end of the 3 days, you'll start to understand. And if you don't, then you can come in for extra help. That frees them up to learn. It frees them up to practice. My kids know I'm on their side, that I'm there. That when I'm walking around, I'm not walking around to bust them for doing it wrong. I'm walking around to be there for them. I'm walking around to help them. And when my kids know that, it's huge. Because in my mind, between consistency and engaging my kids during class time like this is how I win my kids' hearts. My kids know I'm there for them. And so my kids show up for me. When I show up for them, they show up for me. Now I hear teachers complain about my kids don't respect me. And then I hear how they talk about their students. And I'm like, well, you don't respect them. So I give my kids my respect. I give them my attention. I give them my focus, my consistency, my class time. And they give me back. And I really find this to be my essential tool in student engagement. Because when my students know this, it makes a difference. Because that way when I have to set a boundary on them of like, hey, if you don't stop talking, you're going to have to go out in the hall. A, they know I'm being consistent. And B, they know I'm not just being petty. They know I'm there for them, and it carries a little more weight. And this leads to grading. The bane of my existence. I oftentimes joke with people, it's not totally true, but that I would teach for free, but you got to pay me to grade. To me, grading, especially in chemistry, is a balance between time and feedback. You can do quick grading, like grading for completion. You can do quick quizzes and tests that are like multiple choice and matching. Those are quick to grade, but they're really limited on their feedback. The kids you really don't know what they're not getting. It's limited on its feedback to you, but it's also limited on your feedback to your kids. They don't see what they're missing. They don't really understand what they're not getting. And so that's problematic. And so I really want to fix this. So first thing I do for time, I don't grade everything. I refuse. I do not grade every homework assignment I give. My kids do not, when I give them a homework assignment, they do not know the next day whether it's going to be graded or not. Also, I mix it up. Sometimes I grade it for accuracy. Sometimes I grade it for completion. Sometimes I kind of do this hybrid thing in the middle where I just walk by really quick and just check it for accuracy. But it's a really quick check. And so one, I keep them guessing, which keeps them honest. Second, I limit how much time I spend grading and try to maximize really the taking up papers and writing comments and giving feedback. I try to really save that from when it's really, really needed. But this is also one of the advantages of doing the classwork. I use classwork time to give my feedback, which saves me time on the grading on the back end. So I don't have to spend as much time going over homework. I don't have to spend as much time because I know how they were doing on their classwork the previous day. So I can walk around, do a quick spot check of everybody's homework and be like, oh, they're still struggling with this one point. And then I can reteach that point real quick. And because I spent time with them in the classwork time the day before, I have the context to interpret their homework. I got feedback that I needed on them to help me guide my lesson the next day. And it's incredibly helpful, and it saves me a lot of time. And once again, that's kind of that balance there. And I think grading is also another place to really emphasize consistency. This comes back to that fairness thing that kids complain about. When I do a conversion problem like this, I break it into pieces. So putting the given value over 1, and then in the second part there, getting the units in the right spot is 1 point, getting the numbers of the conversion factor in the right spot's a point. Same thing with the third part. And then in the final answer, you have the right unit on the final answer, and do you have the right numerical answer with the correct significant figures within 1 is the last point. And so I grade these, this to me would be a 7-point question, because I'm grading each individual step as a point. And then if I give a quiz with like 5 of these, 5 questions times 7 points is 35 points. And though then all I would do is, so 33 out of 35 is whatever percent, and that's their grade. And so by doing points, it allows me to be really good with my partial credit and consistent. And that really helps me in grading to be consistent and fair. Same thing when I'm grading a test. If I've got, a paper test that's 5 pages long, I grade every class's first page, and then I grade every class's second page, and then I grade everybody's third page. So by focusing just on that one page at a time, I'm consistent in how I'm grading that page. I'm not taking off more off of this period than I was that period because I'm in a bad mood or a good mood or whatever. Because I've definitely learned in my teaching career that my mood affects how I grade things, unfortunately. I really fight against it, and that's one of the things I do to fight against it. But I do know that when I'm like mad, it just doesn't help. Don't grade mad. It doesn't work well. All right. And finally, you got to do what works for you. Grading is important. It is not worth sacrificing your life and your family for. And so one of the things I see teachers wasting, in my mind, my opinion, wasting time on is makeup work. When a kid didn't do their work the second week of school, and here you are at the end of the quarter and their mom and dad see their grade and they flip out like, oh my gosh, Johnny's going to fail. What can he do to make up this homework grade? And teachers sit there and let them turn in this weight work that's like 7 weeks old. I'm like, why are you doing that to yourselves? So I have a very simple weight homework policy, 24 hours. I have a weight policy just because I know life happens and things happen, sporting events run late, basketball teams get back late on the bus, that kind of thing. So I understand that. And so I give them a weight policy, but I also limit it to 24 hours. Because in my teaching career, I've learned one thing. Well, this one thing. If I don't see it in 24 hours, I'm not going to see it ever until mom and dad freak out at the end of the quarter. And so it's just not worth it to me. And so I tell mom and dad, sorry. And usually after the first quarter, mom and dad learn, or Johnny learns, that they can't bail themselves at the end, and they learn how to do their homework. And that's part of what I'm trying to teach them, is that life lesson. All right, labs and activities. Labs are the things that make teaching chemistry fun. They are also the thing that makes teaching chemistry difficult and time consuming. The time it takes to set up a lab, run a lab, freak out about all the safety that, and trying to keep the kids safe, and then cleaning up the lab at the end, it's exhausting. And it takes a lot of extra time, more than any other subject that I know of. Biologists don't have labs that run like this, and physical science labs aren't like this, and they're just unique. And so for that reason, I don't do labs just to do labs. I do my labs for a purpose. Now, I don't have class time to spare, and so I really want to use my labs on purpose. If I need them to introduce concepts or reinforce concepts. But along those lines, sometimes a hands-on activity is better than a lab. For example, if you go to teachinghighschoolchem.com/resources, there's an ionic activity I have there that uses cards that are different sizes to show kids how charges have to balance when you're making ionic compounds. And it's a great little activity that teaches them how ionic bonds work so much better than any lab I could come up with. Or when I'm teaching Vesper, when I'm teaching those three-dimensional shapes, I get like candy and toothpicks, and they have to model it and show me the model, and I have to sign off on it. They learn more about the Vesper shapes and how they work by making models out of candy. And then they're also excited because they get to eat the candy when they get done. And it's kind of a win-win that I get an activity that they get excited about, and I get an activity where I get a result out of the end of it. And it works great. And so I love hands-on activities and stuff like that are just little creative ways, because the great thing about a hands-on activity is, with the candy one, all I have to do is go to the store and buy stuff. That's my setup. 5 minutes, maybe 10. And my cleanup is making sure all the wrappers are in the trash can. And it's great that way. Now, along those lines, when I do labs with chemicals, I'm striving to make sure I pick chemicals that are easy and quick to clean up. And that is important to me. When I get done with a lab, I want to be able to dump my chemicals. I want to either be able to filter things out real quick. I want to be able to flush things down the drain with water. I don't want to have to do any major chemical treatment when I get done. So it's important for me there. And then also with labs, I like to do 2 grades. I do like a classwork grade for participation. What are they doing in the lab? Are they following the safety rules? Are they letting their partner do everything, or are they doing it themselves? That's kind of a good grade for just showing them, hey, how you do something matters. And then I give a second grade, usually a quiz grade, for the write-up. Now, a lot of times for me, in first year chemistry, the write-up's just a handout that I give them, where they got to put in their data, and then I ask them a conclusion question or 2. I'm not looking for huge, big write-ups out of my first year chemistry students. In an advanced chemistry course or an AP Chem course, you got to take that up a notch. But for first year kids, it's just not that critical, because really most college chemistry courses, that's all they're doing there too, is they've got a lab book, they fill in some data, answer a couple questions, and turn it in. Right, and this one's just a kind of little bonus tip. I like to randomize my partners for each unit. I like to, basically I put them in a spreadsheet and use a random number generator to randomize them. And that way I mix it up every chapter, every unit that we do, so that I don't have, kids being partners with their friends or whatever. But also I believe it's important for kids to learn, how to work with different people. You in your teaching career probably had coworkers that you loved, and you've had coworkers that you couldn't stand. And our students need to learn to work with both of those, just like we've had to learn to work with both of those. And so by randomizing partners, I'm trying to help my kids learn those things. So just in recap, so I had the 3 expectations for yourself, for your class, for your students, and for yourself. Really visualize what you want for the year and keep that vision in mind as you do the year. And then the teaching tips, that we have consistency, that really just smooths the path for us and our students. We have using class time, which once again, just it makes life easier. It helps us give that feedback to our kids. And it helps our kids know that we're on their side and that we're there for them. And then grading and finding that balance. And then finally, labs and activities and using them well to reinforce, but also using them well to not put more work on ourselves than we need to. That's critically important. Because these tips are real. I mean, teaching chemistry is hard. It's time consuming. I've taught almost every science and math, 7th grade through 12th grade in my teaching career. And I still think chemistry is probably one of the most time consuming and hardest preps out there. I think probably pre-calculus is probably the only other one I can think of that comes even close in terms of difficulty of teaching. And so this is what I've used in my years of teaching. This is what I've used with my students. It's not just theory, it's real life. It's what I've done. Okay? And these 7 steps, they work great if you're a first-year teacher, and they work great if you're a grizzled veteran. Because one of the things I love about teaching is that every school year is a fresh beginning. That every school year is a chance to say, you know what, this is where I want to grow this year. You know, it's kind of like New Year's resolutions for teachers. You know, this is where I want to grow. This is where I want to push myself this year. And then we get to do that. And I think that's important. So what's this all about? It's all about being proactive and not reactive. It's the beginning of the school year. What are you going to do different? Don't wait for some crisis to show up in your class to be like, oh, wait, I need to do that different. What are you going to do different? Be proactive. Set your expectations. You know, decide how you're going to do homework different this year. Decide how you're going to do labs different this year. Decide that, hey, you know what? My kids always seem to, year after year, really struggle when we get to moles. I'm going to take an extra week this year. I'm going to slow it down a little bit, and I'm going to try to break it down into smaller pieces and help them out with that this year. I want that better. Or maybe you feel like your kids get it, but you struggle with student engagement. Be proactive. How can you take steps this year to really hone in and help your kids out? It's about engaging your students, like I said. Win their hearts, and you will win their minds. Of that I am certain. It's about taming the prep monster, taking steps to just lessen the load on you. And it's about being a great teacher and having a life too. It's about having time for your friends. It's about having time for your family. That is so critically important. I'm not sure why you showed up today. Maybe you've never taught chemistry and you feel like a deer in the headlights. Maybe you're experienced with chemistry, but you're struggling with that student engagement and it's wearing you out. It's eating at your desire to teach. Maybe you're experienced, but it's just feeling stale. And you want some ideas to spice it up, change things, be more creative, be more fun. Maybe you feel crushed by what your administration's asking of you, that your responsibilities way, way outweigh your resources. Or maybe you're here because you want to have a life during the school year and be a great teacher. And it's possible to have both. It is possible to be a great teacher and have a life. And I really hope you get this one thing. You know, from the great movie of my growing up years, Waterboy, you can do it. You know, just, you can do this. You're capable of it. And so this brings a question. You know, you can do it bit by bit. You can do it on your own, which is how I did it. You know, really just struggling to add one piece year after year after year. You can take some of these tips we've learned here and take them and apply them slowly over time. or you can do it more quickly, faster. Because here at Teaching High School Chem, we're all about giving you the resources and support you need to really make this a faster process. Because I think as chemistry teachers, we tend to be a group of people who go it alone, and it's hurting us, and it's hurting chemistry education in America. And we are passionate about helping you and really doing that. And so we have our memberships, and we have 2 membership levels for Teaching High School Chem. We have a basic one that gives you all of the resources you need. And when I say all the resources, I mean this is all of your student handouts, labs and activities, review sheets and tests for all of the chapters in a unit for a full year of chemistry. That's over 300 pages of material, meaning you don't have to go hunting for resources online. You don't have to be trying to make your own resources out of the book. You don't have to be hunting for resources because they're all going to be organized on our website. So that's all there for you. So you won't even have to take time to write your own test. It's saving you time. And also because you're getting everything from us, everything's consistent. The way it's phrased in the lecture notes and the way it's phrased on the homework, the way it's phrased on the quizzes, which is the way it's phrased on the test, helps you be consistent. And then our plus plan, we add to that. I give teaching notes and PowerPoints or videos, at least one of those, for every unit that are there to not only give you the content to teach, but what are great ways to explain it to kids? Where does that creativity and that communication come into play, trying to give that to you? And then we also have the Plus membership has weekly Q&As where we can answer your questions, engage as a community, and hopefully with each other, which means you're not going it alone, which means you're not spending hours looking for things online when you can email me or go to our private Facebook group and get help, because you're not on your own. And that is critical, because we're there to save you time. And so you may be wondering how much it costs you. Well, to me, it's what it would cost you not to do it. Because what it would cost in my mind is our families, our friends. Because if we just saved you 30 minutes a day, we saved you 30 minutes of prep time, not having to write a test or not having to create a handout, or if you're in the plus plan and you have our keys, grading is going to be faster, grading handouts is faster. If we just save you 30 minutes a day, that's 90 hours over the course of a school year. If I can have an extra 90 hours to spend with my family, to spend with my wife, with my son, playing in the sprinklers, spending time with my daughter, spending time with my friends, 90 hours is well worth anything. But if we save you an hour a day, that comes out to 180 hours over the course of a school year. That's 7.5 days of time that we save you. And that's kind of the cost of not joining with us and doing it on your own. But your choice is yours. And so in terms of cost, the Plus plan, which has all of those resources, plus the support so that you're not there on your own, you're not having to waste hours away from your family and friends, making your own resources and making your own keys. That's $37 a month, or $1.23 a day. The basic plan, which is just the resources without the extra support, is $22 a month. And really, like Ariel said at the very beginning, I start back to school on August 3rd, next Friday. And so we're going to make this membership available for sign up between now and then, so that when the school year starts, I can focus on the school year and I can focus on our members. And I'm not having to spend time trying to recruit more members. So we're going to cut it off next Thursday, August 2nd at 3 p.m. Central. And it will really just, like I said, so it's $37 a month. You'll immediately get all the handouts and assessments. You'll get the teaching notes and the videos as well as keys. With the keys, I will ask that teachers verify and prove that they are teachers. The last thing I would ever want is for a student to sign up and get the keys, and that would be catastrophic in my mind. Because we actually had that happen at one of the schools that I taught at previously. So you get the keys, you get the videos, you get weekly live Q&As, members only Facebook group. But to sum it all up, if you want to be a great chemistry teacher without sacrificing hours in your out of school life, then there's no better resource out there for teachers. You're going to have margin during the school year for rest, recharging, relationships, having fun, and being healthy. It's exactly what I wish I had when I started. Like I said, you can start for $37 a month. You can cancel at any time. In fact, I'm taking all the risks because you could sign up, download everything, and then cancel your subscription. But I'm not going to let a few bad apples spoil this for everybody else. Because I want you to see the value here, which is community. And at the end of the day, that's what we're really trying to make is community. We want a community of chemistry teachers, which is why we also have a free Facebook group. You know, we have the one for Plus members, the private one for just for them, but we also have a free Facebook group on our Teaching High School Chem page. And we want you to join our community, a community of chemistry teachers who are encouraging one another and building one another up to really just make each of us better, but to make our students better, to make our schools better. That's what we really want at the end of the day. So right now, I'm going to give you the free bonus, which is, like I said, it's going to be the covalent nomenclature unit, my entire unit. And so let me give you the button in the chat for it. Okay. So that'll take you over to the page. And I'm going to show you real quick on this screen in a moment what that looks like. So make sure you copy down that address onto your handout, teachinghighschoolchem.com/member/covalent. And then I'm going to kick over there and show you on my screen what that looks like. All right, if I can get this to show what I want it to do. All right. So you see that? Okay. All right, so this is where that should take you. Now, this is how all of my pages are arranged within the website. That I have at the very beginning what I call the introduction. This is, hey, are you as a teacher where you need to be, and are your kids kind of where they need to be before you even start into this? So what are the prerequisites for covalent nomenclature? You've got to know the elements and their symbols, locations of metals and nonmetals on a periodic table, and valence electrons. I have a little quiz. This is for you as a teacher to take to make sure you understand the prereqs, and then a very rough pacing guide. It's very rough, mind you, of how I think this should go, and then any notes about things that I think are important. So like here, I do not cover exceptions to the octet rule or formal charges. I think that's just too much for a high school level Chem 1. And underneath that, I have the resources. And right now, this is logged in, and you're seeing everything as a Plus member would see it. So you have the teaching notes, the PowerPoint, and the video. And those, not every chapter has all, not every module has all three, but they'll all have at least one of those. Since covalent bonding is one of my big three, they have everything. So does reactions, and so does most of moles and stoichiometry. They will have every possible resource available. When you scroll down, you got your student materials, different classwork assignments like I talked about, what I use in class to get them primed and to help them along. So I'm giving you the resources that match with what I've just been saying. Homework assignments, quizzes, and then Plus members will have access to a zip file, so that instead of downloading everything individually, they can download everything in one fell swoop. If something is grayed out, that means you don't have access to it at the moment, or it's not been created yet. And then I do the same thing with the Vespers polarity, and then a review and a test. All of this is yours to download as you wish. Use it, test it out, see how it works for you. I'll probably leave this page up for a couple of months with free access, and then I'll probably bring it back down just for my members, but you'll get an email before then so that you have time to get everything downloaded that you want to download. If you run into any issues when you're going through this page, do not hesitate to go over here to support, and when you click on support, it'll take you to this. You can email me or message me. Either of those will work. So if you run into any problems or you're going through a handout and you find a typo, I've done my best to catch every single typo I could, but I would imagine there's probably one or two in there. That's just really hard. And then on here, I've tried to make it simple for you that when you look through this and you see how valuable it is and how much time it could save you, and you want to join, that'll take us over to where we have our page that explains our sales, our two plans. So here's the time until Thursday at 3 o'clock. These are all the features that you have for the Plus plan. And then what do you have to lose? Your time, your sanity, and student performance, that we're there for you. If you choose to register, it'll take you to a very simple, secure, this is fully secure. We take all credit cards and that such. And then once you join, it'll give you your login information. You go to a login page like this. And then on the site, I've got an orientation page like this that kind of guides you through what you need to do to use the site, helps you join the Facebook groups, and then that sends you into the modules and units like atomic theory. And as you'll see, they look just like, sorry, I'll have to pull that up on a different thing. You have to finish this before you go into the rest of the site, and I'm in a different browser than normal, but that's what it is. So once again, so covalent nomenclature, that free unit's right here at teachinghighschoolchem.com/members/covalent. All right, and so that's where you want to go for that. Because once again, we are here to support you, and we want to help you in any way we can. So right now, that concludes the teaching part of this. We're willing to do Q&A right now. But once again, just Ariel actually said she's the chief catalyst of connection. Her heart is connecting people. My heart is the chemistry and the teaching aspect. We're here to help. We really just want to be there. And so, like that Plus plan, I really think that's the best bet. I want to help teachers, and I want to help y'all as much as I can. And that, I think, is the best resource. We were originally looking at $47 a month, but we really want to get y'all involved and get you connected, and so we're down to $37 a month. And really, it's not about the money. It's about us wanting to help you. I'm passionate about students. And I'm passionate about students learning, and I'm passionate about students learning chemistry. And the best way that I can help students learn chemistry is help teachers like you. And so that's what I'm really here for. So if you have any questions about what we've talked about in terms of the content, if you have any questions about the membership or any of that, you can ask them in the chat right now. You can send me an email. You can message me on Facebook. We want to be here for you.